Okay, this is where we've gotten to so far. I'm dying to make this thing start looking like an airplane and we actually take it off, flip it over, and start doing the top half of all the formers. But while working on this today, I realized I had been interpreting the print wrong for this guy right here. I'd been thinking that this former A goes on the outside of everything, but then I started looking a little closer at the print. Let me get that under there for you. Zoom it in. So where we see former A, I'm sorry, this is all crooked. Former A right here, we got to look closely at the dotted lines, all right? We can see that the fuselage former itself kind of has these, well, I guess we'll say longer lines with shorter ones in the middle. This here, the pattern on that looks a little bit different because that's still further inside. And we start looking around, and this one here kind of sort of really shares the look of this guy, or even the motor mount. And that's where learning how to interpret prints saves a lot of wasted time, like I unfortunately went through today when I wasn't paying attention. The use of dashes, cross hatches, whatever. Usually a designer will stick with a certain scheme so that different layers become more obvious. And it would have been cooler if it was a little bit more obvious in this. But whatever, I digress. I want it getting it to fit correctly because it just wasn't looking right. This one's back out. And you can see that's fitted in right down there and glued in, and that ties into the maple block that we put between the motor bearers. So on to the rest. While that was drying, what I did was I glued in former D. I had to pull the back of the fuselage a little bit to get that to line up all the way up and down. And if we zoom in, let's focus. You can kind of see right where it missed as far as where I put the chamfer on the former and all that, because the print doesn't say to do that, but I did it anyway. So I'll just fill that in with glue on both sides when I get it up and out. And then E and F back here. My lines were off that I had tried to be smart and scribed earlier. I'm glad I checked. And then, so this is how I fixtured it up for gluing in the rest of the formers. So we had made sure that, again, this top surface, our datum here, our thrust line, was nice and flat before we started any of this. We're hoping that this will make everything nice and square and even. Again, this is the foundation of the project. If we start square here, there's a lot less screwing around and trying to figure out measurements later on. I feathered the back of each fuse side, just holding that together nice and square with a couple of 1 through 3 blocks. I dropped in, this was already in, remember, so then I did F and then E, just kind of try and bounce around, hopefully not make a big wave. And these were here just to make sure everything stayed put while I was handling things. So again, this is all tacked. I can break this apart if I have to and start over without really damaging anything. So let's see what we got going on here. Okay, just got it off the board. So what I'm looking at is trying to see if anything looks crazy wacky. And that tail looks like that goes down pretty smooth. That looks nice off the bottom side. Oh yeah, nice gentle curve. Doesn't look like it gets notchy or bowy or does any of these sort of things. Look at it from the other side. Here you can see that? See that little sunlight piece right there? I gotta fix that. That's what I was talking about, the former into the doubler. But anyways, take a look at this. So this is what this is on the bottom side. Okay. That looks pretty centered to me. Off to the sides, that looks nice and smooth. Take a look from the top. Yeah, that looks pretty well and centered. Nice and smooth. Alright, I think I'm happy enough with that. I will go ahead and put permanent joints on everything. You know, give it a real good soaking to hold it together back there. And then I will get this cleaned up. Yeah, let's get back under the light. That's better. Okay, so like I was saying, get this cleaned up right through here so that's nice and flat. Clean that up a little. Yeah, that's nice and flat inside. Meets up. Sorry about this light, guys. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Meets up nice and clean here. So next, after I get those all permanently glued and happy, I'm going to put the floor on. Something kind of that ish. Yeah. Like, yeah, ish. This. And then it's going to really kind of start looking like an airplane from there pretty quick. All right. Just about ready to put the floor on. Just wanted to take a second. Let's just stop and appreciate how cool plywood looks when it's feathered out, you know, at an angle. That just looks pretty. Okay, so now the floor fits flat. We'll go up there. We'll true up the front. Make this look all pretty after this is all glued up. And then we continue on the formers and stringers. Just like that, started to look like an airplane. So up to this point, we talked about getting the floor epoxied and glued in. And try and get some better light on this. That's a little better. So the floor contacts here and here, and also makes contact up here, right down to where former A came down, and also where the wing doubler goes down in, and also the fuse side. So this, yeah, it just never ceases to amaze me how much things stiffen up once you get some structure into them. While that was drying, I had it sitting over the print like that as it was drying, so I went ahead and installed formers E and F with the tops cut off. And then I realized my short-sightedness. I should have marked center line on these things before I cut them apart to make lining up a little bit easier. But that's what they make rulers for. So all in all, just like that, kind of sort of starts to look like an airplane.